Hey, welcome back. I think it's been a while. I think I put the cart before the horse again, and a lot of people are coming to this channel kind of pretty brand new to gardening, and you might be looking up companion planting and how you should plant different things, and I'm talking about maybe more advanced concepts than I should. So what I thought I would do is dial it back to basics and do a kind of companion planting guide, permaculture style. So what that actually means is we're going to talk about guilds today. So what's a guild? A guild is just a collection of plants that work together, and the sum of the parts is greater than the whole, or the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And each plant in nature kind of does this by itself, and each plant will have its own specific role in the system, and it'll occupy its own little niche in the system. And there's a whole bunch of different functions that we want. So we want our main crop, obviously. We want fertility building and soil building. We want to attract insects. We want to deter pests. We want to extend our drip edge so that we collect as much water as possible. And we want to mine and dredge nutrients from deep down below the roots of most of the other plants and bring them back up to the surface. So those are the main aspects that we want to have in a guild, and it's kind of like companion planting on steroids. So come with me, we'll show some of my guilds that I've set up. I'll explain some of the plants and why they're in that guild, and that way when you guys are starting your own systems, you kind of know what you're going to do with them. And the question that I get all the time is, what plants go with what? And the actual answer is that anything goes with anything. You just have to think in the layers of the food forest. But if it fills one of those layers, it's good to go. Don't worry about this is good with that and that's good with this. There's so much hand-me-down wives' tale information in this space, and just ignore all that and just get going. And don't have analysis paralysis. Just get working, get busy doing. Stop thinking and just get planting. So I'm standing at the entrance of the food forest, and this is one of our apple trees. And the 7 layers of the forest are the overstory trees. So for example, giant maples. And then we have understory trees, anything that exists underneath the overstory trees. Then you have bushes, the bush layers. You have the herbaceous layer, which is all the grassy weeds, different flowers. And then you have ground covers like clover, strawberries. Then you have the root layer, underground, all the root crops, deep roots of all the trees. And then you have the vining layer, growing up it all. This is some cold hardy kiwi planted at the base of the, at the base of this apple tree. Now this is where it was last year. This year we're hoping for some big growth. I don't know if they do that every year, die back and start from scratch, or if it's just because we hit minus 40 Celsius this winter. Nasty little winter. So most places when you plant a tree will tell you plant trees 20 feet apart based on the tree, maybe some 40 feet. They might tell you 10 feet and then 10 to 20. That's typically the spacing that they do. And an orchard will typically do that. There's high density orchards that do it slightly different, but an orchard would typically do that and have nothing but grass in between. When you have nothing but grass in between, you kind of create a system of inputs, because nature doesn't like just a bunch of grass in between trees, and trees don't like grass. So when I'm designing my food forest, I'm not designing it the way it looks now. Right now it's not that impressive. It's just a bunch of little sticks and twigs. Some of the trees are getting bigger. It's certainly looking nicer. It's still early. Things are gonna get much bigger. But I'm thinking, what is this thing gonna be like at its max life, sustainably long term? So the cherries, the peaches, the apples, depending on the root stock, can be anywhere from 10-15 feet up to 40 feet for an apple, 50 feet even maybe for like some of the biggest apples possible. Nitrogen fixers like the sea buckthorn will just exist about 6 feet, 8 feet. So this serviceberry tree will probably be about 25-30 feet when it's fully grown, and the sea buckthorn next to it will be an understory tree to it. And once it overshadows the sea buckthorn, it will actually die off because they can't take any kind of light competition, so it'll die off. But for now, I'm actually using it as a chop and drop nitrogen fixer as part of this guild with serviceberry, apples as the overstory, peaches kind of as an overstory just on the other side of it here, or pears, sorry. And in between them all, we have different bushes. So we have currants, we have elderberry, we have currant bushes, beautiful flowers coming on the currants, already pollinated, and we got some nice currant berries coming. Another elderberry. And the birds love elderberries and make delicious syrup and jam. The birds love service berries as well, and the berries themselves are very good. Nitrogen fixing sea buckthorn, one of the healthiest berries in the world. And apples. More currants. So these are bush layer I'm still at. Hascaps. Nitrogen fixing Siberian pea shrub. And here as well. So that's nursery stock nitrogen Siberian pea shrub that I'll grow and spread out. Those will end up being about 15 feet as well. So in the future, this whole entire area is going to have a canopy. Going to have a canopy tied right across the top, and I'll kind of prune it. But once those branches meet each other, they'll kind of tie together, and the trees will balance themselves out. And in between will be a giant wall of bushes. You actually probably in the future won't even be able to see out to the lawn that the kids play on when you're inside here. It'll really feel like you're inside of a forest. And then underneath that, we have deep tap-rooted nutrient accumulators like this comfrey. So most of the trees and bushes will occupy under the ground, maybe 5 feet. The taproot would probably go maybe 10 feet, 12 feet. And then most of the branches and most of the roots will be in the top couple inches to the top foot. The comfrey here drives a deep taproot. It does send lateral roots as well. Anyone who's dug one up will know. People say it's just a taproot. It's not. It will somewhat compete with other plants. It does have some lateral roots, but for the most part, it gets most of its nutrients from deep in the taproot, or at least it gets some. And it brings those nutrients from deep down in the ground where it will just sink into the earth. Oh, we got some strangling dog vine. Where it'll sink down into the earth, and then it brings it and pumps it up and puts it in the leaves. And then I come along and I chop it and drop it. It's a little early to chop this. I'm not going to take it all off. I normally take the whole thing off. So I just chop it and I can drop it anywhere. But I'm going to drop it in the more open places, say around this peach that has peas growing up it. And I'll just cover the soil. We got some nice mushrooms. And what this does is the nutrients that were in the ground that plant dredged up from the bottom, that would have got sunken down into the ground until volcanic activity brought it back up. That plant dredged up that nutrient and put it in its leaves, and then now we put it back on the topsoil. and we're going to feed the topsoil organisms with that chopped material. So that's a deep tap-rooted nutrient accumulator, and they're very important parts. You can actually plant them. This is one of my first trees I ever planted, and you can tell I was very shy about competition. So you can see where I planted the comfrey, very, very far away. And I'll show you as I ended up planting more and more trees, I packed things tighter and tighter together. So there's a comfrey a foot away from that serviceberry tree. We have comfrey absolutely everywhere because it's just such an amazing soil building plant. We have comfrey a foot away from this pear. We've got perennial kale. We've got more of this nasty dog strangling vine. So I use this dog strangling vine and the Bermuda grass just as kind of chop and drop as well. And I don't necessarily dig it all out because I'm just going to sever the roots and make more. I just let it feed the other plants. Eventually it'll give up if I stay on top of it, but it'll feed the plants as it goes. And this pear is starting to sucker a little bit, so we'll stop that. Pruning trees, anytime you see suckers, you can rip them off. You don't have to worry about when you can do it. If there's growth somewhere that you don't want it, you can rip it off. This rhubarb is a companion plant to this pear. It has a comfrey next to it. Daffodils, onions, garlic, another nitrogen fixing sea buckthorn. And all these plants are doing different functions in this guild. This rhubarb is a chop and drop. So I can take it, I can drop the leaves down. It smothers weeds out, covers the soil, keeps the organisms in the soil alive. It'll feed the soil organisms and it'll build soil. However, it's also an edible crop with the rhubarb itself. And more importantly, it's a drip edge extender. So this pear will only get whatever water falls in its fair share of space. And if you zoom down on this guild, the drip edge of the pear is roughly in the middle. Let's see, this is hard to film. Right in the middle of this rhubarb plant is the drip edge. So any water that falls further over this way would either get sucked right away by the pear roots or kind of flow away and feed other plants. However, the rhubarb has these giant leaves where raindrops that hit, the outside of this leaf will hit, flow down this amazing little groove of the stem down towards the middle, and it's right in the drip edge of this pear tree. So what this rhubarb does, and especially if you put lots of them around the tree, such as the comfrey, when it gets bigger, it acts this way too, is all rain that falls in and around this tree, now this tree is collecting more of it, and the outside stuff is focusing and funneling it back in towards the tree. So in this way, the rhubarb is more than just, some people would say don't plant rhubarb there because it sucks the nutrients of the tree away from the tree. But it doesn't really, because I'm feeding the tree with the rhubarb. I'm feeding the soil life, which then feeds the tree. I have nitrogen fixers in and around, and nature plants very densely. I have well mulched soil, so the activity in the soil and nutrient cycling is through the roof. So I can support more plants around one tree. I don't have to just leave it as one tree. If I had just a tree with grass surrounding it, then maybe I wouldn't be able to grow so much around it. Here's another guild where we have a peach tree here. We have a serviceberry tree that I tried to sneak in, and I think it got up over the strawberries right here. And that serviceberry will get up over the strawberries and it'll be just fine. And then we have apple here, and we have apple here, and apple behind me as well. Those will be the overstories for this section. The serviceberry will be an understory tree in this guild. And then we have elderberries. We have elderberries here as a bush. We have hascaps hidden in the strawberries. You can't even really tell. You know, this thing will get 6 feet tall, and the strawberries will just cover all the ground around it. Got another hascap here. Another smaller hascap here. We've got clover as ground cover, nitrogen fixer. Every time I pull this clover and drop it down, it's also releasing nitrogen under the ground via the root nodules. We've got tomatoes snuck in there that'll grow up the tree. We've got, every tree gets a nitrogen fixing legume, pea, a vine to grow up it. We've got comfrey, chop and drop. Oh, I don't want to pull the whole thing out. I just made probably 3 comfreys there by splitting some of the roots. It's a good problem to have, I guess. We've got onions acting as aromatic confusers for pests. So something that likes strawberries, for example, or peaches, or goji berries, will only smell the onion, and they won't necessarily realize it's here. I've hidden a goji berry right here, in right next to something that looks similar to it, the sea buckthorn. So when you zoom back out, you can't really even tell that there's 2 different plants there. But that sea buckthorn with its long thorns will protect the goji berries. Here, it'll protect it from predation until the goji berries get established. Once that goji gets established, it's good. It'll be off to the races. We got daffodils. These come up the earliest thing in spring. They start growing and capture some of that water from the snow melt, store it in their leaves, and then they'll die back and put that back into their bulbs. But not all of that will go back into the bulbs. Some of it will get leached into the soil to feed soil life. And it fills spaces and gets photosynthesis and energy capture from the sun going. We've got asparagus growing up right through this goji berry planted in tight. That's another smell barrier for deer especially. And then we have strawberries covering the ground everywhere, currants as bushes, goji berries as bushes. We've got peppers, annual pepper, well I guess perennial pepper, but here it's annual. So most people plant their peppers in their gardens. I just put it right in my food forest. Onions, garlic, service berries. We've got lovage in there, another pepper. And tying it all together, obviously, always, is underneath the wood chips. Look at this wonderful fungal mycelia. This is King Strophoria, edible mushroom. It's a saprophytic mushroom, so it eats wood chips, it eats dead things. Becomes food for me, and ties the whole system together via the mycorrhizal association. So the fungal network will wrap itself around the fruit trees and balance. So we have an apple tree here, we have goji berries and gooseberries, and goji berries are on the wall there, just on the border. Goji berries, we have gooseberry, we have currants, strawberries, and they all have different nutrient demands for what they put into their fruit. Well, that fungal network will balance. So if the strawberries deplete one nutrient over here, but over here the gooseberry and the currant don't necessarily need that nutrient, then the mycorrhizal mycelium network of the fungus will transfer it across and help spread out the balance. We're growing some okra. This is a Russian olive. It's a nitrogen fixer. Chop and drop. Look at that robin landing right in. I don't know if you guys saw that or not, and then took off. We've got lovage, a great pollinator attractor and pest confuser as well, and it's great. It's got a little spice for a salad. This is cold hardy kiwi, and we've got bee houses. We've actually got a visitor there, do we? And we've got comfrey, cold hardy kiwi, strawberries, clover, goji berries, clover for the bunnies so that they don't eat my goji berry. And that's essentially permaculture companion planting, which is companion planting on steroids. So the general idea is just know the size of the plants that you're planting so that you don't put 2 trees a foot apart. But even if you did, you know, there's 3 trees in a whole planting. I can't remember the gentleman who kind of made that a bit famous, a guy in Florida, Bob Welsh, I can't remember, Bob something nursery in Florida. So it, like, even if you put a couple trees in close together, they'll kind of balance each other out. This is some yarrow and valerian, actually lovage and valerian. All different herbs and aromatic pest confusers and pollinator attractors. So just kind of plant stuff everywhere, figure out about how big everything is, and just squeeze it all in together. Your goal is to get thick mulch on the ground and then to cover every square inch with plants. Now this doesn't look like it's covered yet. In another month, it'll be a sea of green. You won't even be able to see any wood chips in here. So I hope you enjoyed this this video on guilds. It's probably a bit too long. I'll try to keep it shorter in the future. But there's a ton of information in there. And let me know below in the comments if you want shorter videos, more details on any specific plants, detailed on a guild, or just high-level overview. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.